In Andy Weir's book, Project Hail Mary, there is an alien named Rocky, about the size of a small dog, but its body is made out of various metals and stone, so it is extremely heavy. By the standards of Earth life and classification, Rocky is an extremophile, from a planet with an average temperature of 210 degrees Celsius and an atmospheric pressure of 29 Earth atmospheres. Beneath all that atmosphere, the surface of the planet was dark, like the bottom of the sea. So in the total absence of light, the life forms from Rocky's world had never evolved eyes. Instead, they had extremely acute hearing. Using tiny hairs all over their bodies that were sensitive to the slightest vibrations, they saw with sound, to a degree of accuracy and specificity that would even rival Earth animals such as cetaceans like dolphins or chiropterans like bats. Rocky was working with a human named Ryland Grace in an effort to understand what you might think of as an interstellar pathogen, in order to stop this pathogen from contaminating stars. There is a scene in the book where Ryland is looking out the window of his spaceship over a planet far below, the origin planet of the pathogen called astrophage. To Rocky, the window which allowed light to pass might as well have been a blank wall because he had no eyes. His sight came from echolocation, and he was fascinated by Ryland's ability to perceive the electromagnetic spectrum. To Rocky, that ability was as alien as his extremophile body, evolved for temperatures and pressures that would instantly kill a human, was alien to Ryland. Rocky would often remark on human vision, referring to it as a maze. As Rocky and Ryland deorbited their ship lower and lower into the atmosphere of the origin planet of astrophage, Rocky asked Ryan if his eyes could even see the surface of the planet below. Ryland responded that yes, of course he could. Rocky responded again, a maze. Rocky's ability to construct, in his mind, a visual representation of his environment by way of extremely accurate echolocation was absolutely incredible, but the human eye is more amazing still, because we carry within each one of us the ability to detect the radiation emitted by stars, and use that radiation to not only create a picture of the world around us, but to even see the entire cosmos limited only by the distance light travels. As Rocky said, a maze. And the human eye is just amazing. We tend to talk frequently about how incredibly powerful the eyes of other animals are, such as hawks and eagles with their ability to spot a mouse a mile away, or owls with their ability to see in what humans would consider to be complete darkness. But we humans have some of the best eyes in the animal kingdom. We have superb color vision and depth perception, superior to most, though not all, animals in the natural world. And we have an unrivaled ability to spot patterns in nature. It allows us to quickly peel away the mask of camouflage. And even outside the environments for which we are evolved, the terrestrial landscape, we can spot patterns in the microbial world, the atomic world, the cosmos at large. Our eyes truly are a maze. And as an astrophotographer, I've always thought that one of the most interesting things about our eyes is that we do not experience visual noise. But we do experience some odd visual phenomena. For example, if you rub your eyes, you'll experience pulses of color and shape called phosphenes, rings, spots, or flashes of light that you might see due to the stimulation of pressure changes created in your eyes when you rub them. And if you suffer a blow to the head or perhaps drink too much, you might have some struggles with seeing double because your two eyes are not coordinating properly. And sometimes people might see floaters, which is congealing gel in the eye. But none of these things are really the same thing as noise, if noise is defined in the usual way, either interference with an optical signal, or resulting from random interpretation due to the lack of information, which is the kind of noise that we often see in digital imagery. Not long ago, I covered how to deal with noise in digital astrophotography, and had remarked about our eyes' amazing ability to not see noise. And I had remarked that since our eyes do not see noise, if we are going to create astro images that are as close to human perception as possible, I felt we should do our best to remove all noise from astro images. This provides a very clean image that is much closer to natural human vision. But a topic not covered was that some persons do see noise. It's not a large number, but significant, between 2 and 3%, and it brings up the question, does the fact that some persons see noise validate leaving noise in astro images? The noise that I am talking about is called visual snow syndrome. It is the result of a non-life-threatening neurological condition that affects not the eyes, but how a person's brain processes visual information. The primary symptom of visual snow syndrome, or VSS, is snow that appears in one's field of view in lighted or darkened conditions. It is a network brain disorder, meaning many parts of the brain come together to create VSS, but it's very much linked to hypermetabolism and hyperexcitability in the lingual gyrus. Additionally, disruptions in the thalamus, which act as the brain's sensory filter, and altered connectivity in the salience and limbic networks also interfere with the brain's ability to filter out background noise. The end result is the brain inserts random information into visual perception, noise, and this often appears like white dots, like flashing snow, hence the name visual snow syndrome. Some persons with visual snow syndrome also experience vivid geometric patterns, sometimes called eyelid theater. And other persons may experience polynopsia, a visual symptom where an image or stimulus continues to be seen, persists, or reappears well after the original object has been removed from view. And the visual artifacts are further complicated because some persons with VSS will experience pareidolia, which is the tendency to perceive meaningful images, patterns, or faces in random or ambiguous stimuli. You know how when you look up into the clouds sometimes you might see faces in the clouds? Well, persons with pareidolia would experience that far more frequently, seeing random images, patterns, and faces almost anywhere and everywhere. And persons with VSS also often experience a number of non-visual symptoms, such as vertigo and dizziness, as well as migraines and tinnitus due to neural overstimulation. Most of those, however, are considerations for neuro-ophthalmologists. With my own background in the field of psychology and my focus on astrophotography, my concern is the role of the visual snow itself in the visual perception of astrophotography. Persons with VSS are more likely to see snow in darker conditions. One of the reasons for this is very similar to why astro cameras are more likely to pick up noise in low light images. In a situation of low light, the visual processing portion of the brain turns up what you might think of as its gain. The noise that is created by a brain that is experiencing the hyperactivity of VSS is brightened and increased and finds its way into images. But persons with VSS actually have the snow occurring in their field of view whether or not there is stimulation and whether their eyes are open or closed, because the noise isn't actually generated by lack of signal. The noise is generated by hyperactivity within the visual processing regions of the brain. In other words, the noise they see when looking at any subject, including astrophotos, is not a function of the subject itself, it's a function of the way their brain is operating. It is generated by the brain's own activity, and it will appear in anything they look at. Though the noise is going to appear more prominently when they are in dark settings or looking at dark images. And that's simply because the noise has its own false illumination. Because the noise is generated by the brain, its appearance does not depend on the illumination in the environment, but the brain's own functioning. So, in the absence of a bright image or a bright visual setting, its appearance is going to be more prominent. And since astrophotography is typically dark in nature, persons with VSS may well see more noise in astrophotos. VSS also occurs on a spectrum, which is to say that for some persons its effects are relatively minor, while for others it can be extremely difficult to deal with and greatly interfere with their ability to see and function. Likewise, persons with VSS may have any of the other visual or physical symptoms, or none of them. A person may go their entire lives without VSS, and then one day it suddenly appears for unknown reasons. Other persons may have it all their lives. It's an unpredictable disorder, and because VSS was only discovered or medically documented in 2018, there isn't really a cure at this time, though there are some effective means to manage the symptoms to a degree. The topic of this video came up when, during that previous video on noise in astro images, a person suggested that it should be completely reasonable to leave noise in astro images because our human eyes do perceive noise. And I thought it was a valid point to consider further. Does leaving noise in an image make it any more realistic, any truer to how we see things, both for those without VSS and for those with it? I've pored over a lot of the literature on the topic since then, and I have to conclude that whether or not a person has VSS, to be true to human perception, we do need to do our best to eliminate noise. The fact is, it is not the norm for human vision, any more than, say, colorblindness, astigmatism, or myopia are. And, as with all the aforementioned conditions, their effects will show up within perception, regardless of whether or not one would leave such effects within an image. In other words, whether or not we leave noise within an image will not change whether or not a person with visual snow syndrome will see noise within an image. The noise from visual snow syndrome will show up regardless. In fact, leaving noise within an image not only doesn't make the image more realistic to a person with VSS, but it can actually worsen their perception of the image. Busy images create hyperstimulation, which can exacerbate the appearance of noise within visual perception. So if a person with VSS were to regard an astro image with noise left in, they will see the noise within the image, plus the noise created by visual snow syndrome, and they may see even more snow because the noise creates additional busyness within the image, further exacerbating the VSS condition. The simple reality is human vision works very differently from the way cameras create images. And when our eyes, and the parts of our brain which process visual information from our eyes, are working optimally, we don't see noise in images, regardless whether we're in good light or low light. In extreme low light information situations, some persons might experience what's called Eigengrau, which is German for intrinsic gray and also known as dark light. This is caused by retinal cells in the optic nerve continuing to fire baseline signals, leading to the brain interpreting complete darkness as a kind of deep gray, which has sometimes been called a velvety fog. And within this Eigengrau, some persons might see moving colors or random specks of light, which are also the effects of the baseline signals of retinal cells in the optic nerve. And while this might be considered a kind of organic noise, it does not really resemble the kind of noise seen in digital photography. Like VSS, it always goes on, regardless of how much light there is, regardless of what we see. But human vision is contrast-based, so if we see anything at all, we barely notice a low-level phenomenon like Eigengrau. We don't make space a velvety gray due to Eigengrau, nor do we stick patches of random color in space due to Eigengrau. We portray the image as true as possible to the object, in order that our eyes can provide us a subjective perception of the image as true to the image as possible. Of course, that will always be limited by both our eyes and our brain's visual processing systems, plus our own learning, leaning, personalities, and so on. But in all cases, the only way to get the truest perception is to keep the object of that perception as true to itself as possible. Because of this, I still assert that astrophotography best practice is to do everything possible to remove all noise. I could apply the same reasoning to why I don't make my images slightly blurry despite the fact that I'm slightly nearsighted. If I put a little blur into the images so that they appeared the way that my uncorrected eyes would see them, I'm not portraying the images more realistically. I'm simply portraying the images according to my own optical perceptual issues. And if I were to look at those images later with that introduced blur, I would simply see whatever blur my eyes already have in them when I look at objects at a distance on top of the blur that's in the image. So I think we should always aim to shoot and develop every image as true to its appearance as possible. Noise-free, blur-free, and for exactly what it is. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear your opinion. I myself do not have VSS, but if you do, you might have your own perceptions on this issue, your own very valid perceptions because you deal with it. And I think it would help us all to learn about it from your perspective. Please, leave your thoughts and observations in the comments section below. And as always, thank you for watching, and be sure to get out there and shoot that amazing sky.